Time, that invisible, indifferent, and non-negotiable flow. It is the only currency the universe distributes in absolute fairness to every living soul, regardless of wealth or poverty, power or weakness. We all receive the same fixed allocation, 24 hours every day. No more, no less. Yet, the way we use this absolutely fair allocation creates vast disparities. There are those who, within those 24 hours, have built empires, created world-changing inventions, or simply lived lives of profound meaning. And there are those who, within the very same 24 hours, feel time slip through their fingers, leaving behind regret and untouched potential. The question is not whether you have enough time. The real question is, what are you doing with that ceaseless, invisible flow? There is a silent enemy we rarely name correctly, but it is constantly eroding that most precious asset of ours. That enemy is procrastination. It is not loud. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or warning signs. Procrastination creeps into our lives disguised as comfort, ease, a false sense of security. It whispers sweet, seemingly convincing justifications into your ear. I'll do it tomorrow. I'm not ready yet. I need more information before I begin. I work better under pressure. And so you wait. You wait for a perfect moment that will never arrive. You wait for inspiration to strike. You wait until you feel ready. But in that process of supposedly wise waiting, time keeps flowing. And unlike money, which you can earn back once lost, time, once it's gone, is gone forever, permanently. There is no reclaiming it. Think about this. Every minute you procrastinate is a minute of opportunity slipping away. Every hour you hesitate is an hour of experience you could have gained, an hour of learning you could have absorbed, an hour of progress you have forfeited. And the cost of that forfeiture, over time, becomes staggering. It's not just the loss of a specific opportunity, it's the erosion of potential, the diminishing of will, the accumulation of guilt and frustration. Procrastination doesn't just steal time, it is the silent assassin of dreams, the invisible hand that keeps you shackled to mediocrity. But why is it so easy to fall into the trap of procrastination? Because it's comfortable. The human mind, by instinct, seeks the path of least resistance, the safest path. And nothing feels safer than standing still, doing nothing. Procrastination helps you avoid the initial uncomfortable feelings. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, the awkwardness of beginning something new. This comfort is the enemy of progress. Every time you delay, you are implicitly choosing immediate comfort over long-term growth. That choice adds up, day by day, until years have slipped by, and the life you wanted is now just a distant echo of what could have been. But there is a way out. The path begins with a deep understanding that procrastination is a mindset. It is a mental habit. And like any habit, no matter how deeply rooted it seems, it can be broken. It can be replaced by a stronger habit, the habit of action. To defeat the beast of procrastination, the only truly effective weapon is action. Not massive action all at once, just action. Beginning, right now, not tomorrow, not later, now. Look to history. We see countless living proofs of the extraordinary power of refusing to procrastinate. Turn back the pages on the life of Andrew Carnegie. Born into poverty in 1835 in Scotland, immigrating to America at 13 with almost nothing, Carnegie understood the value of every single moment from a very young age. While others squandered hours on fleeting pleasures, Carnegie invested every minute, every hour of his life into building his future. He took any job he could find, learned constantly, always seeking ways to add more value. By 30, he was already a formidable force in the steel industry. His extraordinary rise from a penniless immigrant to one of America's wealthiest men wasn't merely the product of talent or circumstance. It was the result of the compound interest generated by his relentless investment in his time. Carnegie had recognized a truth that most of us miss. Time is the great equalizer. Every person, regardless of wealth or status, receives the same 24 hours daily. The difference lies in how we utilize this universal allocation. Those who achieve remarkable success aren't given extra hours. They simply extract maximum value from each moment they possess. How might your life transform if you treated each hour as though it were incredibly precious? What if you approached every day as though it were your final opportunity to advance toward your dreams? Procrastination loses its seductive power when you truly grasp that the clock isn't merely measuring your day, it's counting down your life. The most profound time wisdom comes from understanding that life isn't measured in years, but in moments of presence and action. A single hour of focused work, a genuine connection, or time spent in creative flow often contributes more to our legacy than days of distracted, procrastinated existence. Every moment truly matters, because collectively, these moments are your life. How will you spend the remaining currency of your hours? More dangerous than any lie others can tell you is the lie you whisper to yourself each time you delay action. Procrastination isn't just plain laziness. It seduces you with sophisticated rationalizations that sound like wisdom, but function as poison. I'll start tomorrow. I need more information before I begin. I work better under pressure. The timing isn't quite right. These statements sound reasonable, even responsible, yet they represent the elaborate architecture of self-sabotage that prevents achievement long before any external obstacles appear. This internal deception system operates with remarkable efficiency because it targets your vulnerabilities. It knows precisely when to offer relief from discomfort, when to suggest that waiting is prudent rather than paralyzing, and when to convince you that hesitation is actually thorough preparation. Consider the example of James J. Hill, the visionary railroad builder who transformed America's Northwest through sheer determination. Born in 1838, Hill didn't wait for perfect economic conditions or government backing to pursue his railway ambitions. While competitors sought federal subsidies and optimal circumstances, Hill moved forward. He constructed the Great Northern Railway through challenging terrain when conventional wisdom strongly advised patience and delay. Hill understood a fundamental truth. Waiting is rarely about preparation. It's about fear cleverly disguised as prudence. He recognized that someday is where dreams go to quietly expire. There, without the discomfort of failure, but crucially, also without the possibility of triumph. What truly separates those who achieve from those who merely aspire? It isn't talent, it isn't luck, it is their relationship with time and discomfort. Achievement requires confronting the uncomfortable reality that beginning is always harder than planning to begin. The moment of initiation brings resistance, uncertainty, and the possibility of inadequacy into sharp focus. To break free from procrastination's hypnotic grip, you must first identify its specific language in your life. What particular lies does it tell you? Which excuses have you elevated to the status of legitimate reasons? The procrastination that plagues a perfectionist differs from that affecting someone fearing failure. Yet both function with equal destructiveness. Try this experiment. Write down every reason why you haven't started your most important project. Then, question each one mercilessly. Is it really true that you need more information, or is information gathering simply a comfortable substitute for the action you fear taking? Do you genuinely work better under pressure, or have you simply never experienced the power of methodical progress without artificial, deadline-induced urgency? Your answers will reveal the intricate web of self-deception that has become so familiar you no longer recognize it as fiction. The remedy begins with radical honesty. Acknowledge that procrastination isn't a work style or a personality quirk. It's a protection mechanism against discomfort. Once recognized, you can implement strategic countermeasures, breaking tasks into smaller components, creating immediate consequences for inaction, or establishing accountability structures that override internal resistance. The honest answers about your excuses might terrify you, and if they terrify you, they're probably true. Procrastination doesn't just take your time, it directly drains your wealth and success. The ledger of your life contains two columns: what you've accomplished and what you've postponed. While we meticulously track our financial accounts, few of us calculate the staggering cost of delay, the invisible tax we pay when opportunity passes while we remain stuck in preparation mode. Procrastination extracts its toll, not in dramatic, obvious ways, but through the quiet accumulation of unrealized potential. Consider the investment account never opened, the business idea never launched, the skill never developed, the connection never made. Each represents not merely a missed opportunity, but compound interest forever lost. When you delay action by just one day, you sacrifice more than 24 hours. You forfeit the momentum, the learning, and the incremental progress that would have generated exponential returns. This subtle mathematics of missed opportunity rarely appears in financial statements, yet it determines the ultimate balance of your success account more decisively than any other factor. Jay Gould, the controversial yet undeniably successful railroad magnate, born in 1836, understood this principle intuitively. Despite humble beginnings, Gould recognized that hesitation was a luxury he couldn't afford. While others analyzed market conditions endlessly, Gould moved decisively. He identified opportunities in the rapidly expanding railroad industry that others overlooked or were too cautious to pursue. His approach wasn't reckless, it was pragmatic. He understood that perfect information and ideal conditions are theoretical concepts that rarely materialize in the messy real world. By the time a clear consensus emerges about an opportunity's viability, its highest return period has typically already passed. Gould's fortune, among the largest of America's Gilded Age, wasn't built through superior resources, but through superior timing, the courage to act while others were still deliberating. The wealth-draining power of procrastination operates through several primary mechanisms: the obvious loss of the initial opportunity, the subtler loss of learning and experience, which prevents readiness for future opportunities, and the debilitating loss of momentum. Breaking procrastination's wealth-draining cycle begins with recognizing that action itself is a form of capital, one that generates returns through experience, feedback, and momentum. Even imperfect action creates value through learning, while perfect plans without implementation remain perpetually worthless. Try to track your delay cost by estimating the value lost through postponed decisions. What would that business idea have generated if launched last year? What salary increase would that certification have created if completed 6 months ago? These mental calculations can create powerful motivation by making procrastination's hidden price tag visible. Procrastination dissolves the moment you make a genuine decision, not the half-commitments we often mistake for decisions like "I'll try" or "I hope to" or "I plan on," but the irreversible kind. The kind that eliminates all other options and makes retreat functionally impossible. True decision possesses a finality that fundamentally transforms your relationship with action. The very word itself reveals this power. Decision comes from the Latin decidere, meaning to cut off. When you decide, you sever alternative paths, channeling all your energy in one direction rather than dispersing it across countless possibilities. This concentrated focus explains why decisive people accomplish what others merely contemplate. They aren't necessarily more talented or resourceful. They've simply reduced the internal friction that paralyzes most of us between contemplation and action. Herbert Hoover exemplified this decisive approach long before becoming America's 31st president. Born in 1874 and orphaned at 9, Hoover could have easily surrendered to circumstance. Instead, he made uncompromising decisions that propelled him forward. As a mining engineer, he transformed failing operations into profitable ventures through swift, clear-minded choices when others hesitated. During World War I, Hoover's decisive leadership saved millions from starvation through the Commission for Relief in Belgium. When conventional wisdom suggested waiting for better conditions or more resources, Hoover created solutions through immediate, decisive action, orchestrating complex food delivery systems across war-torn regions when others saw only insurmountable obstacles. Hoover understood what psychology now confirms. Decisiveness creates its own momentum. Each decision strengthens your decision-making muscle, while indecision atrophies it. The more you practice decisive action, the more naturally it comes, and the less power procrastination holds over you. To harness this transformative power, begin with decision clarity. Vague intentions breed hesitation, while specific commitments demand action. Replace "I should exercise more" with "I will walk for 30 minutes every morning at 7 o'clock a.m. starting tomorrow." This specificity creates accountability and eliminates the decision fatigue that often fuels procrastination. Next, engineer decision consequences. When Cortés burned his ships upon reaching the New World, he eliminated retreat as an option for his men. Similarly, you can create conditions where following through becomes easier than backing out. Paying for annual gym memberships up front, publicly announcing your goals, or establishing accountability partnerships can serve this purpose. Perhaps most importantly, practice decisiveness in small matters to build capacity for larger ones. Decision-making is a skill that strengthens with use. Begin with minor choices: what to wear, where to eat, which task to tackle first. Practice making them quickly, without second-guessing. This builds the neural pathways that make decisive action your default response. When procrastination tempts you, remember, Indy is itself a decision, the decision to remain exactly where you are. Every moment spent in hesitation is a vote for the status quo and against your potential. Willpower. It isn't a fixed trait bestowed at birth, but a capacity developed through deliberate practice. The misconception that some people naturally possess extraordinary self-discipline, while others don't, has prevented countless individuals from developing this crucial ability. This fixed mindset becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Believing willpower is unchangeable guarantees it remains undeveloped. Science confirms what history's achievers have always demonstrated. Willpower functions remarkably like a muscle. It strengthens with consistent use and atrophies with neglect. Neurologically, each act of self-discipline, however small, reinforces the relevant neural pathways in the brain, making subsequent acts of discipline progressively easier. What initially requires enormous conscious effort eventually becomes second nature through this biological transformation. George Westinghouse embodied this progressive strengthening of willpower throughout his remarkable career. Born in 1846, Westinghouse began developing his discipline in his father's agricultural machinery shop before serving in the Civil War. Each significant challenge he overcame, from inventing and championing a safer railroad braking system to revolutionizing the entire electrical industry, built upon previously developed reserves of determination. When Westinghouse championed alternating current, AC, against the powerful direct current, DCE system favored by Thomas Edison, he faced not merely technical challenges, but a relentless, well-funded opponent. Edison even resorted to publicly electrocuting animals using AC to demonize it in the public's mind. Lesser individuals would have abandoned the fight, buckling under the pressure and the negative publicity. But Westinghouse's previously strengthened willpower allowed him to persist through this brutal war of currents, despite immense financial strain and damaging public relations attacks. His ultimate triumph was not solely technological. It represented the culmination of willpower consistently applied across decades. The electrical system powering our modern world exists largely because one man's disciplined persistence outlasted another's powerful opposition. The transformation of your own willpower begins with understanding its progressive, trainable nature. Start with challenges slightly beyond your current capacity. Difficult enough to require effort, but achievable enough to build confidence. The specific domain matters less than the consistent practice of choosing long-term benefits over immediate gratification. Begin each morning with a small, deliberate act of discipline. Perhaps making your bed perfectly, completing a brief workout, or dedicating 15 minutes to your most important project. Before checking email or messages, these seemingly insignificant actions create positive momentum that carries into larger challenges throughout the day. Track your willpower win, however modest. A visible record of your growing discipline becomes powerful internal motivation during the inevitable periods of resistance or self-doubt. Remember that willpower depletion is temporary. Research even suggests that simply believing your willpower is unlimited significantly increases your capacity for sustained effort. Strategic rest also enhances willpower rather than diminishing it. Schedule brief, intentional recovery periods between demanding tasks, just as elite athletes do between intense training sessions. This prevents the burnout that often masquerades as permanent willpower failure. Perhaps most importantly, connect your discipline to a deeper meaning or purpose. Westinghouse didn't just sell electrical systems. He envisioned transforming human potential and industry through accessible energy. When willpower serves something larger than momentary comfort or a simple task completion, its capacity expands exponentially. One of procrastination's most dangerous disguises is its appearance as prudent caution. It whispers seductively that delay is wise, that by postponing action, you're simply gathering more information, mitigating risks, and protecting yourself from potential failure. This deception transforms procrastination from an acknowledged weakness into a perceived virtue, a shield. However, the safety procrastination promises is entirely illusory. Rather than truly protecting you from danger, it virtually guarantees harm through opportunity loss, skill stagnation, and the cumulative weight of unfulfilled potential. The comfort it offers is temporary and ultimately hollow, much like an anesthetic that numbs the pain while the underlying condition causing it worsens significantly. William Mulholland's transformation of Los Angeles through the creation of its vital water infrastructure perfectly illustrates the false security of procrastination. Born in 1855, Mulholland rose from being a mere ditch digger to a self-taught civil engineer through persistent, determined action when others hesitated. When Los Angeles faced devastating water shortages in the early 1900s, a crisis that threatened its very existence, Mulholland didn't delay or retreat. He envisioned and then relentlessly executed the 233-mile Los Angeles Aqueduct, a project of unprecedented scale and technical difficulty that many established experts deemed absolutely impossible or wildly premature. Had Mulholland yielded to the seductive safety that procrastination promised, waiting for perfect conditions, complete information, or universal public approval, Los Angeles would never have developed into the sprawling metropolis it became. Instead, he recognized that the truly greater risk lay not in the ambitious action, but in paralyzing delay. While conventional caution dictated that a self-educated engineer should never attempt such a monumental project alone, Mulholland understood that genuine, lasting safety came through directly addressing the city's existential water crisis, not through avoiding the terrifying challenge. The safety illusion thrives on cognitive distortions that feel entirely rational in the moment. When we postpone difficult conversations, challenging projects, or significant life changes, we tell ourselves we're being prudent, we're preparing more thoroughly, or we're simply waiting for genuinely better timing. The procrastinating mind rarely acknowledges the far greater, insidious dangers of continued inaction. Breaking free from procrastination's false safety spell requires consciously recognizing its distinctive language. Phrases like, "I just need to do a little more research," "I'm not quite ready yet," or "the timing just isn't optimal," are frequently disguises for fear and avoidance, rather than indicators of genuine, productive preparation. Test each delayed justification by asking yourself, would I give this exact same advice to someone I genuinely care about and want to see succeed? The answer, when brutally honest, often reveals the core deception of procrastination. The antidote begins with reframing action itself as the true safety mechanism. Starting imperfectly, however messily, creates essential feedback and learning that guides improvement. Perfectionist delay, conversely, prevents the very learning and adaptation needed for success. Ironically, those who act despite feeling unprepared typically achieve competence faster and build true security more quickly than those who wait indefinitely until they feel fully, perfectly ready. Ask yourself honestly, right now, what significant opportunity costs am I currently bearing in exchange for this illusion of safety? What crucial skills remain undeveloped, relationships unformed, or valuable contributions unmade because I have confused immediate comfort with genuine long-term security? The most dangerous risk isn't a single failed action. It's the slow, steady decay of potential through persistent delay. True safety comes not from avoiding challenges, but from building the capacity and courage to meet them effectively. Like Mulholland, who transformed a city's future by providing water when others saw only insurmountable desert, your greatest security and capacity for greatness lies in the action that procrastination, disguised as safety, is currently preventing you from taking. Monumental achievements rarely, if ever, begin with monumental actions. Instead, they invariably emerge from humble beginnings. From small, often unremarkable steps that, when viewed individually, appear insignificant. This counterintuitive truth explains why so many people never achieve their grand ambitions. They wait, perpetually, for the dramatic, large-scale opportunity, or the perfect launching point, rather than simply embracing the quiet, powerful momentum of modest beginnings. The psychology behind this reluctance to start small is quite revealing. The vast, overwhelming gap between our current reality and our ambitious, large-scale goals creates intense cognitive dissonance. This discomfort is precisely what triggers the urge to procrastinate. Our minds naturally prefer the comfort of planning elaborate ventures that we might undertake someday over the simple, often uncomfortable act of taking one small, imperfect action today. We tell ourselves we'll start when conditions are absolutely perfect, when we magically have more resources, when we feel overflowing with confidence. In doing so, we effectively surrender our progress and potential to circumstances entirely beyond our control. The journey of Edwin C. Barnes powerfully illustrates the transformative power of starting small, without needing guarantees or fanfare. Born in 1870, Barnes began life with no significant connections, no wealth, and no special inherent advantages. Yet he set his sights on an audacious goal, becoming a business partner to Thomas Edison, America's preeminent inventor. Instead of waiting until he acquired impressive credentials or networking his way in, Barnes simply showed up at Edison's laboratory and stated his intention. His first position wasn't the partnership he envisioned. It was a menial, labor-intensive job, far from the executive suite. Many people would have found this humble, challenging beginning beneath them and walked away. But Barnes recognized it for what it truly was. Not his final destination, but his essential entry point. From this seemingly insignificant position, he demonstrated an exceptional work ethic, absorbed every piece of information he could about Edison's diverse businesses, and gradually, diligently, made himself indispensable through consistent, reliable, small actions. Eventually, through years of quietly demonstrating value and seizing opportunities that arose from being present, Barnes became Edison's exclusive marketer for the Ediphone dictation machine, a role that transformed the fortunes of both men. His remarkable success didn't come from somehow managing to start big. It came simply from starting at all, and then building methodically, consistently from that initial foundation. The science behind starting small is compelling and aligns with how our brains function. Research on habit formation consistently shows that tiny actions effectively bypass the brain's deep-seated resistance mechanisms. When we commit to actions so small they feel almost trivial, reading one page instead of an entire chapter, doing a single push-up instead of committing to 20, writing one paragraph instead of drafting an entire essay, we dramatically reduce or eliminate the psychological barriers that prevent initiation. These seemingly insignificant micro-commitments are incredibly powerful because they create the crucial element of momentum. This momentum naturally expands over time. The writer who commits to writing just one sentence often finds themselves completing an entire paragraph. The entrepreneur who makes just one sales call frequently finds the energy to make a second, then a third. Starting small does not mean staying small. It means creating the initial, crucial movement that overcomes the inertia keeping you stuck. This approach also dramatically accelerates learning through rapid feedback cycles. When you take small, tangible actions daily, rather than major, infrequent actions, you gather far more real-world data points about what actually works and what doesn't. Each minor step, each small attempt, becomes a learning opportunity that refines your approach, gradually increasing your efficiency and effectiveness without the crushing pressure of trying to do everything perfectly at once. To effectively implement this principle in your life, identify the absolute smallest possible action that would constitute meaningful movement toward your goal. For someone starting a new fitness routine, it might literally be putting on your workout clothes. For a business, it might be researching just one potential client contact. The action should be so incredibly modest that it feels almost impossible to refuse or postpone. Then, establish simple triggers that automatically initiate these tiny actions: a specific time of day, arriving at a particular location, or completing a preceding, unrelated action. This environmental design removes the need for constant willpower and conscious decision-making, further reducing the resistance that fuels procrastination. Finally, track these small actions visually, perhaps on a calendar, creating a tangible chain of consistency that becomes increasingly difficult to break. This visible record of progress provides immediate psychological reinforcement, even when larger, tangible results remain distant. Time moves with perfect democracy, distributing exactly 24 hours daily to every single living person, regardless of wealth, status, or grand ambition. Yet some transform these identical hours into extraordinary achievement and meaningful lives, while others find that same allotment somehow inadequate for even modest progress. The fundamental difference isn't in time itself, but in how consistently it is harnessed and utilized. Consistency is the force that transforms time from a neutral flow into an incredibly powerful multiplier. It works through a mechanism as reliable and potent as compound interest. Just as money invested grows exponentially when interest generates further interest, consistent actions create results that themselves produce accelerating returns over time. This compounding effect beautifully explains why remarkable achievements often appear to materialize suddenly or rapidly after long periods of seemingly quiet, uneventful progress. The daily small efforts, maintained consistently, are building invisible foundations that eventually break through dramatically. Few historical figures understood this principle better than Hetty Green, the the truly remarkable financier, born in 1834, who became America's wealthiest woman despite operating in the overwhelmingly male-dominated and often volatile world of 19th century finance. Nicknamed the Witch of Wall Street for her notoriously austere habits and unconventional approaches, Green built her immense fortune not through spectacular single investments or wild speculation, but through the relentless, consistent application of sound financial principles across 5 decades. While contemporary financiers chased dramatic market swings and sought speculative, high-risk opportunities, Green maintained an unwavering, almost boring consistency. She invested methodically during market downturns when others panicked and fled. She conducted thorough, painstaking research when others relied on rumors or tips. She maintained substantial cash reserves when others overextended themselves financially. None of these individual actions appeared particularly dramatic or genius in isolation, but their consistency, applied across 50 years, transformed her initial modest inheritance into a fortune exceeding $100 million, an astronomical sum at the time, 0 cents attached, making her orders of magnitude wealthier than most of her peers. Green's extraordinary success clearly reveals consistency's often hidden power. It doesn't merely accumulate results, it fundamentally alters the realm of possibility. Her steady, predictable approach meant she invariably had capital available during market panics when assets were severely undervalued, creating acquisition opportunities completely inaccessible to less consistent, more speculative investors. Her unwavering reliability as a lender, even during financial crises, made her a preferred source of credit when more erratic market participants withdrew entirely. Consistency didn't just build her wealth, it created unique structural advantages unavailable to competitors whose actions were sporadic or unpredictable. The neurological basis for consistency's effectiveness lies in how it fundamentally reshapes brain architecture. Repeated, consistent actions establish and strengthen specific neural pathways in the brain. Pathways that become increasingly efficient and automatic with use. What initially requires significant conscious effort and willpower gradually becomes a natural, almost unconscious habit through this process. This explains why those who successfully maintain consistent habits eventually find them far easier and less draining than inconsistency. Their brains have quite literally rewired themselves to facilitate these established patterns. Harnessing the power of consistency requires understanding its paradoxical nature. While consistency's long-term rewards are absolutely extraordinary, the daily actions producing them often appear frustratingly ordinary, even insignificant, often disappointing those seeking immediate validation or dramatic shifts. This mismatch between unremarkable daily inputs and truly remarkable long-term outputs creates a significant motivational challenge that derails most attempts to establish consistency. Overcome this challenge by implementing commitment devices that help maintain consistency, regardless of day-to-day motivation fluctuations. These might include establishing accountability partners, utilizing habit tracking systems, like marking a calendar, creating environmental design changes that make the desired behavior the easiest option, or adopting identity-based commitments that frame consistency not as a chore, but as a fundamental expression of who you are becoming. Equally important is selecting your consistency targets wisely. The compounding power of consistent action works identically for both positive and negative patterns. Consistent learning compounds into deep expertise. Consistent complaining compounds into chronic negativity and a diminished sense of well-being. Choose carefully what you choose to repeat, recognizing that consistency acts as an amplifier for whatever it touches. Start with a single daily action, one so incredibly modest that maintaining it feels almost trivially easy. This minimum viable consistency creates the essential foundation and proves to yourself that you can be consistent, laying the groundwork for more ambitious patterns over time. Track this single action visually, creating a powerful feedback loop that makes your consistency tangible and self-reinforcing. In an age defined by unprecedented levels of distraction, your ability to focus has arguably become your scarcest and most valuable resource. While the total amount of time remains fixed at 24 hours daily, the quality of those hours, which is determined by your ability to concentrate and apply your mental energy, varies dramatically between individuals. The modern environment, from our phones to constant notifications and the pervasive culture of multitasking, is engineered specifically to fragment our attention. This ensures that those who cannot deliberately protect and cultivate their focus inevitably surrender control of their most valuable asset, their attentive mind, to the external forces constantly vying for it. Cyrus McCormick brilliantly demonstrated this transformative power of protected, dedicated focus during the 1830s. Born in 1809, McCormick did not invent the mechanical reaper, a revolutionary agricultural machine, amidst constant interruption or a scattered effort across multiple projects. Instead, he deliberately created and fiercely guarded dedicated periods of uninterrupted thought, focused experimentation, and meticulous refinement in his workshop in rural Virginia. While other aspiring inventors of his time often scattered their efforts across a multitude of potential innovations or struggled with distractions, McCormick maintained a relentless, almost singular focus on solving one incredibly significant problem: how to mechanically harvest grain efficiently. This singular, protected focus allowed him to incrementally refine and ultimately perfect the reaper, a machine that revolutionized agriculture worldwide and dramatically increased food production capabilities. McCormick's groundbreaking innovation didn't emerge primarily from superior innate intelligence or luck. It resulted from his superior attention allocation, his deliberate willingness and ability to direct his limited cognitive resources and precious time towards one consequential challenge, rather than dispersing them thinly across many. Reclaiming and strengthening your focus begins with recognizing its true, immense value. Most people substantially underestimate the invisible, yet very real, cost of interrupted attention. Research consistently reveals that after a significant distraction, it can take an average of 23 minutes to fully return to a state of deep, high-level focus on a complex task. Implement a focus reclamation strategy, starting with a mindful redesign of your physical environment. Create a dedicated workspace, if possible, that visually and psychologically signals to your brain that serious, focused attention is expected there. Schedule dedicated, focused blocks of at least 90 minutes, often considered the minimum time required to achieve meaningful cognitive momentum on a complex task, and protect these periods with the same level of seriousness and discipline you would give to a critical business meeting or an important appointment with someone else. The language you use matters here. You are not merely finding time for focus. You are consciously, intentionally allocating your most valuable, limited mental resource toward your absolute highest priorities. Develop a clear, predetermined distraction response protocol for the inevitable interruptions that will arise. Rather than immediately surrendering your attention to an incoming email, message, or notification, briefly note the distraction without engaging with it, and promise yourself a specific, predetermined time later in the day to address it. This capture and defer approach prevents the distraction from immediately consuming your valuable mental bandwidth, while still ensuring important matters aren't forgotten entirely. Perhaps most importantly, understand that you must train your attention capacity systematically, just as you train a physical muscle. Focus, like physical strength or endurance, deteriorates if not consistently exercised. Begin with dedicated focus sessions matched to your current capacity, perhaps just 25 minutes initially if that feels challenging, and gradually extend them as your mental endurance and ability to resist distraction increases over time. Track your focus metrics as diligently as any business tracks financial performance. How many hours of genuine deep focus did you achieve today? What percentage of your workday was spent in a truly attentive state? These objective measurements create accountability for this otherwise invisible and often neglected asset. The most persistent and arguably the most destructive delusion in human psychology is the belief that the perfect moment to act somehow magically awaits just beyond the horizon. This pervasive waiting mindset, the deep-seated conviction that circumstances will somehow align more favorably in some imagined future time, becomes the unacknowledged but powerful architecture of unfulfilled potential. It quietly transforms what were initially intended as temporary pauses into periods of permanent stagnation, all while maintaining the comforting illusion that great achievements remain possible someday. This paralyzing habit of waiting stems from a fundamental misconception about how greatness actually emerges in the real world. We imagine it requires absolutely ideal circumstances, abundant resources delivered up front, complete and total information about every variable, perfect timing based on external signals, and maximum self-confidence before starting. History repeatedly reveals the opposite truth. Greatness consistently emerges from those who act decisively amidst imperfect, often actively challenging or even hostile conditions. Andrew Mellon embodied this anti-waiting philosophy throughout his remarkable and immensely successful career. Born in 1855, Mellon built one of America's greatest fortunes, not by waiting for periods of economic certainty, but precisely by acting most aggressively. During periods of maximum uncertainty and widespread fear, when others retreated in panic during financial crises, Mellon advanced strategically, acquiring undervalued assets. When conventional wisdom counseled extreme caution, Mellon moved decisively to seize opportunities visible only to someone already in motion. His approach to building Alcoa, the aluminum giant, perfectly exemplifies this anti-waiting mindset. When aluminum production was widely considered prohibitively expensive and impractical for widespread use, Mellon invested heavily in the nascent industry. Before the technical manufacturing challenges were fully solved, and long before proven markets truly existed, while others waited for the market, Mellon created it through proactive investment. His banking activities followed remarkably similar patterns, extending credit and making bold investments during tight money markets when others withdrew entirely, identifying lucrative opportunities that others deemed far too premature or risky. Mellon's billions were not accumulated through superior innate market timing based on prediction, but through the unwavering willingness to act and commit capital while others remained frozen in deliberation, perpetually waiting. The waiting mindset creates a particularly destructive form of opportunity blindness. While you passively wait for ideal conditions for your primary goal, adjacent opportunities, often more valuable and fruitful than your original objective, pass entirely unnoticed or become inaccessible. This happens because waiting isn't merely physical inaction. It's a profound psychological state that narrows perception. The mind stuck in waiting focuses exclusively on very specific trigger conditions it's anticipating, rather than remaining open and receptive to unexpected possibilities and emergent insights that arise only through engagement. Mellon's most profitable acquisitions were often not targets he initially sought from afar, but opportunities he recognized and seized while actively engaged and in motion within the financial and industrial landscape. Breaking the debilitating habit of waiting begins with recognizing its fundamental deception. Perfect conditions don't arrive. They are created through action. The entrepreneur waiting for ideal market validation before launching their product or service discovers that such validation only truly emerges after they have taken the step of launching and engaging with customers. The writer, waiting for perfect inspiration, learns through experience that creative momentum generates inspiration rather than merely following it. To counter the urge to wait, actively create accountability structures that make waiting more uncomfortable, inconvenient, or costly than acting. These can include making public commitments, putting financial stakes on the line that you forfeit if you delay, or establishing partnerships with others who depend on your forward movement. Implement a rigorous worst-case analysis specifically on your waiting decisions. When tempted to delay, explicitly calculate and visualize the maximum potential downside of immediate, imperfect action versus the potential accumulating costs and irreversible opportunity loss of continued waiting. This often sober analysis reveals that the risks of taking action are far more manageable than the mind's fear initially imagines, while the true compounding costs of waiting are substantially greater and more insidious than consciously acknowledged. Perhaps most effective is consciously adopting a ready enough threshold for action. Determine the absolute minimum viable preparation that makes moving forward logically possible, and then make an ironclad commitment to act immediately. Once this low threshold is reached, this actively prevents the endless, paralyzing pursuit of additional readiness that characterizes chronic waiting. The distance between intention and accomplishment is bridged by a single, powerful tool: the deadline. Without this vital temporal boundary, even the most passionate ambitions often remain perpetually in progress, becoming victims of the inherent human tendency toward endless preparation, overthinking, and perfection-seeking. Deadlines transform the abstract intention into the concrete commitment, converting vague aspirations into time-bound requirements that demand specific, tangible action. Their power lies not just in the arbitrary date itself, but in how they fundamentally alter your relationship with a project by injecting a necessary sense of urgency, focusing dispersed attention onto critical path activities, and demanding ultimate resolution and completion. Joseph Pulitzer profoundly understood and harnessed this transformative power when building his pioneering newspaper empire in the late 9th century. Born in 1847, Pulitzer revolutionized American journalism not merely through editorial innovation, but primarily through the relentless, unforgiving discipline of deadlines woven into the very fabric of his organization. In an industry where timeliness was not merely important, but determined a newspaper's relevance and impact, Pulitzer established and strictly enforced immovable deadlines throughout every level of his operation, from reporters gathering stories in the field, to editors finalizing copy and layouts, to the printing presses beginning their crucial production run. This deeply embedded, deadline-driven culture created his significant competitive advantage. While rival publications debated whether their stories were perfectly complete or perfectly written, whether conditions were ideal for printing, Pulitzer's newspapers were already hitting the streets, reaching readers with timely information first. His success powerfully demonstrated that consistently meeting good deadlines with solid content dramatically outperforms indefinitely postponing publication in the pursuit of theoretical content perfection. The newspaper that reaches readers with 90% of the full story today invariably achieves more impact and commercial success than the publication agonizingly striving to deliver 100% of a slightly better story tomorrow. This same uncompromising principle applies far beyond journalism to virtually any endeavor, where completing and delivering something creates tangible value that planning alone cannot. The business launched imperfectly today can immediately begin generating revenue, gathering crucial market feedback, and adapting in the real world, while the perpetually planned, theoretically perfect business remains superior only on paper, but practically worthless in the marketplace. Creating effective personal deadlines begins with understanding their psychological mechanics, particularly how to counteract the ease of simply moving a self-imposed date. Self-imposed deadlines often lack the external consequences inherent in those set by an employer or a client, making them highly vulnerable to being casually renegotiated or ignored when the urge to procrastinate arises. To counteract this, you must artificially manufacture consequences for yourself that make adhering to the deadline actually feel more comfortable or less painful than extending it. One powerful technique is to share your deadlines publicly with specific people whose opinions you genuinely value. This triggers the powerful social commitment effect. Research shows that publicly stated commitments are significantly more likely to be fulfilled than private ones due to our natural aversion to appearing inconsistent or failing in the eyes of others whose respect we seek. Another effective strategy is to implement financial stakes. Pre-commit a specific sum of money that becomes either a tangible reward if you meet your deadline or a financial penalty, perhaps paid to a charity you dislike or a friend you owe if you miss it. The psychological pain of losing money is a profoundly strong motivator and counteracts the temporary comfort of delay. You can also utilize accountability, partnerships, or apps where progress is tracked and reported, creating external social pressure and support. Procrastination persists, not primarily as a flaw in our time management techniques, but as a fundamental mental framework, a specific, often unconscious way of relating to tasks, to discomfort, and to our future selves. This crucial distinction explains why traditional productivity tactics, sophisticated calendars, automated reminders, intricate organizational systems often provide only temporary relief or limited impact. Until you address and transform the underlying mental patterns that are generating the procrastination behavior, external solutions are merely treating the symptoms, while the cognitive dysfunction causing them continues unabated beneath the surface. The procrastinating mind operates through predictable, often subtle, patterns of thought and feeling. It tends to magnify the initial discomfort or perceived difficulty of simply beginning a task. Simultaneously, it skillfully downplays the long-term consequences and accumulating costs of delay. Furthermore, it unrealistically overestimates its future willpower and ability to handle things later under pressure. These aren't fundamental character flaws unique to you. They are often automatic, evolved mental processes that, if left unmanaged and unchallenged, consistently sabotage intentional, productive action. The extraordinary transformation of Henry Flagler exemplifies the decisive advantage conferred by mental mastery and a profound mindset shift. Born in 1830, Flagler initially achieved immense success and wealth as John D. Rockefeller's shrewd business partner in the formidable Standard Oil, accumulating a fortune that would satisfy virtually anyone's ambition and allow for comfortable retirement. Yet, at the age of 60, an age when most men of his era were firmly contemplating retirement and winding down, Flagler underwent a profound, self-induced mental reframing that astonishingly unleashed a second, unprecedented wave of achievement. While visiting Florida for his wife's health, Flagler perceived possibilities others simply missed entirely. He didn't merely see underdeveloped coastline and swamps. He envisioned and decided to create nothing less than an American Riviera, a destination for wealth and tourism. This required him to fundamentally shift his internal self-concept from seeing himself primarily as a successful businessman who had completed his career to viewing himself as a visionary empire builder who was just beginning his most significant, audacious work. This conscious mindset shift, at such a late age, seemingly demolished the psychological resistance and inertia, a form of comfortable procrastination that typically accompanies late career success and comfort. Over the subsequent 3 decades, an astounding display of sustained energy, Flagler constructed luxurious grand hotels that became landmarks, established entire cities that became hubs of activity, and, most astonishingly, built the seemingly impossible Florida East Coast Railway extension all the way to Key West, an engineering marvel spanning 156 miles, much of it over open ocean viaducts. His immense achievements during this late phase of life were not the product of suddenly acquired superior resources. They were the direct result of a transformed mental framework that rendered the mindset of delay and comfortable stasis fundamentally incompatible with his new self-concept as a builder and visionary. The process of initiating this powerful, procrastination-destroying mindset shift begins with consciously recognizing that procrastination itself represents a particular frame, a specific filter through which you are interpreting your tasks. You are interpreting them primarily as burdens to be avoided, rather than as opportunities for growth, contribution, or achievement to be seized. This interpretation isn't objective reality. It's a perspective constructed by your mind, and importantly, it is a perspective that can be deliberately and consciously reconstructed. Start by meticulously examining the language you use internally and externally when describing your most procrastinated tasks. Notice how frequently phrases like, "I have to do this," "I should really get this done," or "I need to start that" appear. All these phrases subtly imply external imposition, obligation, and burden, rather than internal desire or chosen engagement. Deliberately, consistently replace this language with phrases that acknowledge your agency and reframe obligations as opportunities or choices. I choose to work on this. I get to build this skill. I want to achieve this result. This subtle linguistic shift, practiced repeatedly, reinforces the idea that you are in control and that the task serves your larger goals, reducing resistance. Next, challenge the perfectionistic thinking that so frequently fuels procrastination. The procrastination mindset assumes that work must be flawless or perfectly comprehensive right from the start to have any value. The action mindset recognizes the liberating truth that imperfect action taken today creates vastly more value through momentum, learning, feedback, than perfect planning that remains perpetually unexecuted. Consciously adopt "good enough to start" as your operating standard for initial action, rather than demanding "good enough to finish." This lower threshold removes the paralyzing pressure of premature perfectionism, allowing you to begin. Perhaps the most powerful mindset shift is moving from an exclusive outcome orientation to embracing a process orientation. Procrastination thrives when focus remains solely on the daunting, distant end result, making the simple act of starting feel overwhelmingly insignificant or impossible in comparison. The action mindset finds intrinsic value, even joy, in the process itself, the learning, the personal growth, the skill development, and the simple engagement that occur regardless of the immediate, perfect outcome. Implement identity-based motivation by consciously shifting your focus from "what should I do" to "who am I becoming by taking this action?" Flagler didn't just build hotels, he consciously became the developer of Florida in his own mind. This identity-based framing makes consistent, productive action a matter of personal integrity and identity alignment, rather than mere discipline applied to an external task. You act not because you should, but because that is fundamentally who you are. Practical implementation of these mindset shifts begins with small, deliberate mental interventions immediately preceding a task you tend to procrastinate on. Before you begin, take a moment to explicitly name the limiting procrastination mindset that is appearing. That's my fear of not being ready showing up again. And consciously, actively choose to adopt the empowering, action-oriented mindset. Instead, okay, I choose to focus on the value of just beginning, no matter how small or imperfectly. With repetition, this conscious practice trains your brain, making the new, empowering framework increasingly automatic and replacing the old procrastination patterns. The master of the mind eventually becomes the master of achievement. The pursuit of perfection, while sounding like a virtuous and desirable goal, has silently sabotaged more dreams, extinguished more potential, and halted more progress than almost any external obstacle or difficulty ever could. This seemingly noble standard, the demand for flawless execution, the waiting for ideal timing, the insistence on complete and total preparation before beginning, often becomes the invisible, self-imposed barrier between intention and actual achievement. While perfectionism frequently masquerades as a form of diligent quality control or a high standard of excellence, its true psychological function is frequently risk avoidance, disguised as aspirational quality. Action, even if it is imperfect and flawed, generates the crucial momentum, feedback, and learning that perfectionism perpetually postpones. This fundamental, often overlooked truth explains why those who are willing to act imperfectly but consistently vastly outperform those who plan perfectly but act intermittently or never at all. The perfection seeker remains trapped, often comfortably, in a perpetual preparation mode, endlessly refining plans and waiting for a theoretical state of perfect readiness. Meanwhile, the action taker, despite their initial imperfections, immediately begins gaining real-world experience, collecting invaluable feedback from reality, and achieving tangible results that accelerate their progress exponentially through a feedback loop. Richard Arkwright profoundly embodied this action over perfection principle during the early years of the Industrial Revolution. Born in 1732 to humble beginnings, Arkwright conspicuously lacked formal education and extensive technical training when he began developing his groundbreaking spinning machinery. His early designs for the spinning frame, a revolutionary machine, were decidedly imperfect by later standards. They were inefficient, prone to mechanical breakdowns, difficult to operate initially, and constantly required hands-on modification and troubleshooting. Had Arkwright waited until his spinning frame designs achieved a state of theoretical or operational perfection before attempting to deploy them, the mechanized textile industry, a driving force of the Industrial Revolution, might have emerged decades later, if at all. Instead, Arkwright adopted an action-oriented, iterative approach. He built and deployed his imperfect machines despite their flaws. He meticulously observed their operation in real-world settings, gathered crucial feedback from workers and early users, and used this practical knowledge to implement continuous improvements and refinements. This iterative, action-first approach allowed him to establish the world's first truly water-powered cotton spinning mill in 1771, transforming textile production from a slow, labor-intensive cottage industry performed in individual homes to a centralized, industrial powerhouse operation performed in factories. Arkwright's immense fortune, which eventually made him one of England's wealthiest individuals, did not emerge primarily from superior innate intellect or privileged access to resources. It flowed directly from his pragmatic willingness to act and deploy imperfect solutions, while others remained in theoretical stages, refining blueprints indefinitely. His competitors often possessed more formal technical knowledge than Arkwright, but they remained trapped in endless cycles of refinement, seeking an elusive theoretical perfection. Meanwhile, Arkwright's imperfect but operational mills generated both real-world revenue and, more importantly, practical insights and learning opportunities that were completely unavailable to those who never moved beyond the planning phase. The principle of action beats perfection operates through several key mechanisms. First, and perhaps most critically, action in the real world generates concrete feedback that planning alone simply cannot replicate. Only by actually implementing your ideas, products, or services can you identify their actual, practical weaknesses and areas for improvement, rather than just theoretical or anticipated ones. Second, the act of beginning, of taking action, however small or imperfect, builds crucial momentum that helps overcome the initial psychological resistance that is always strongest at the start of a project. Third, taking action actively develops essential skills and capabilities, resilience, problem-solving, adaptability, that preparation alone cannot possibly cultivate. Modern research in fields like psychology and behavioral economics strongly confirms what Arkwright demonstrated intuitively centuries ago. Studies on skill acquisition and creative output consistently show that practitioners who prioritize producing a larger volume of work, even with variable quality in the early stages, ultimately outperform those who meticulously labor to perfect a much smaller number of pieces before releasing anything. For instance, a well-known study found that ceramics students who were graded based purely on the weight, quantity of pottery they produced over a semester learned far more and produced objects of higher ultimate quality than students who were graded only on their single best piece. Focus on perfection. The sheer volume of action and iteration provided superior learning. Implementing the action beats perfection principle in your own life begins with consciously calibrating your standards appropriately for each specific phase of a project. Early stages of exploration or creation demand only good enough to test, good enough to gather feedback, or good enough to generate momentum, rather than demanding good enough to launch or finish. This consciously lowered threshold for starting removes the paralyzing pressure of premature perfectionism, making initiation significantly easier while still maintaining progress. Next, establish extremely low, minimum viable action thresholds. Define the smallest, most manageable step that would genuinely move your project forward today. For writing, this might be literally 50 words. For a new business venture, it might be making just one quick exploratory call or sending one introductory email. For a fitness goal, it might be 5 minutes of simple exercise. These micro-actions bypass the feeling of being overwhelmed that so often fuels perfectionist delay because they seem too small to possibly require perfection. Perhaps most importantly, redefine your personal definition of success and failure from flawless execution to valuable learning. This perspective shift is crucial. It transforms imperfection or mistakes from evidence of failure into essential feedback and learning opportunities, making action, even messy, imperfect action, not merely acceptable, but absolutely necessary and desirable for actual progress. Consciously create artificial constraints or deadlines that functionally force imperfect action. When a graphic designer has 4 hours, rather than 4 weeks, to create a draft, perfectionism becomes simply impossible. Yet the work produced typically meets functional requirements and generates essential conversation and feedback, demonstrating how much perfectionism serves psychological rather than practical needs. Life's overall trajectory rarely shifts through slow, linear, gradual evolution. Instead, fundamental, direction-altering transformation typically occurs at specific, discrete decision points. Pivotal moments when consciously choosing one path over another creates cascading consequences that permanently alter your direction and future possibilities. These crucial, high-leverage decisions function like switches on life's vast railroad tracks, powerfully directing your journey toward destinations that would otherwise remain forever invisible or inaccessible. This fundamentally non-linear relationship between key decisions and subsequent life outcomes explains why seemingly small choices made at critical junctures can often yield disproportionately massive results downstream. A single conscious decision to relocate to a new city, to pursue a specific course of education, to finally start a long-delayed business venture, or to definitively end a long-strained relationship can create butterfly effects that reverberate and compound throughout decades, entirely altering your future landscape. Understanding this powerful amplification effect transforms the process of decision-making from a routine administrative task into arguably life's single most consequential skill. The remarkable journey of John Wanamaker perfectly illustrates this decision point principle in action. Born in 1838 to modest circumstances, Wanamaker made a series of pivotal decisions that transformed both his own life and fundamentally reshaped American retail. His first crucial decision came at age 23, when he chose to leave secure employment to open a small men's clothing store in Philadelphia. Despite having minimal capital, limited experience, and facing significant economic uncertainty in the aftermath of the Civil War. This initial decision, consciously choosing the path of entrepreneurial risk over employment security, altered his entire life trajectory. Had Wanamaker decided differently, perhaps seeking a promotion within existing business structures, the history of American retail would have unfolded in a completely different way, and his name might be unknown today. Instead, his courageous decision created the foundation for what would eventually become America's first true department store. Wanamaker's second profoundly transformative decision came later, when he made the unconventional choice to purchase and adapt an abandoned railroad freight depot to serve as the vastly expanded location for his growing store. A seemingly counterintuitive choice, widely ridiculed by contemporaries clinging to traditional retail locations and formats. This audacious decision to establish a single, enormous store under one roof, offering previously unheard of innovations like fixed, marked prices, eliminating haggling, money-back guarantees, and unprecedented amenities and customer services directly challenged virtually every established retail convention of his era. The immense success that flowed from these two distinct, courageous decisions ultimately made Wanamaker one of America's wealthiest individuals, widely recognized as a pioneer of modern advertising techniques, and eventually even led to his appointment as Postmaster General of the United States. His life story powerfully demonstrates how specific, conscious decision points function as literal gateways to entirely new, previously unimagined paths and possibilities that are simply inaccessible from your current location unless that decision is made. The underlying science explaining decision-induced transformation involves several key mechanisms. Neurologically, making a firm decision creates a state of cognitive commitment that efficiently redirects limited cognitive resources from the often paralyzing process of deliberation and analysis toward the productive process of implementation and execution. Psychologically, making significant decisions helps to establish or clarify personal identity, reinforcing positive feedback loops that make subsequent actions and choices aligned with that identity feel increasingly natural and automatic. Practically, making a clear decision inherently eliminates or narrows down alternative options, powerfully focusing your energy and resources that were previously dispersed across multiple possibilities onto the chosen path. Harnessing this transformative power of decision begins with actively identifying high-leverage decision points in your own life, those moments of choice that offer significantly asymmetric upside relative to their downside risk, particularly those related to compounding assets. These typically involve fundamental areas like skills you choose to learn, relationships you choose to invest in or cultivate, key habits you decide to adopt, or investments you commit to making consistently. A single conscious decision to begin learning computer programming, to start investing a portion of your income consistently each month, to deliberately build a professional or personal network, or to adopt a fundamental keystone habit like daily exercise or reading, can create returns and open future doors that vastly exceed the initial investment of time, effort, or capital. Implement a structured decision quality protocol specifically for these high-leverage choices in your life. Rather than making significant decisions reactively, impulsively, or purely emotionally, create deliberate, structured space and time for consciously weighing available options, carefully considering potential long-term implications, and examining alignment with your core values and desired identity. This doesn't necessarily require agonizing overthinking, but rather ensuring the decision emerges from clear, foundational priorities and a deliberate process, rather than simply reacting to temporary circumstances or immediate feelings. Perhaps most critically, cultivate the capacity for decisive closure, the vital ability to fully and wholeheartedly commit to the chosen path immediately after the decision is made. This means intentionally establishing concrete first-step next actions that begin as soon as possible following the decision, creating essential momentum that helps prevent the crippling paralysis of second-guessing or returning to indecision. Wanamaker didn't merely decide to open a new type of store. He immediately took concrete steps like securing a location, lining up inventory suppliers, and arranging financing, making reversal increasingly difficult and less appealing with each implementation step. The person you become 5, 10, or 20 years from now will be determined to an astonishing degree by the handful of significant, high-leverage decisions you choose to make today. Choose wisely, commit fully and quickly once the choice is made, and remember that the most dangerous decision of all is allowing the most key choices in your life to be made passively by default, through inaction rather than consciously and powerfully by intentional design. Procrastination persists in our lives not primarily because of a fundamental deficiency in time management strategies or organizational systems, but fundamentally as a failure in mind management. This critical distinction is why even implementing the most sophisticated traditional productivity tactics, using intricate schedules, setting numerous reminders, adopting advanced organizational apps, often provides only temporary relief. Until you address and transform the underlying mental patterns and internal dialogues that are generating the procrastination behavior in the first place. External solutions merely treat the visible symptoms, while the cognitive dysfunction causing them continues unabated beneath the surface. The procrastinating mind operates according to predictable, well-documented patterns of thought and feeling. It habitually magnifies and emphasizes the initial discomfort, perceived difficulty, or sheer size of beginning a task, making it feel overwhelming. Simultaneously, it skillfully downplays and rationalizes away the long-term consequences and accumulating costs of delay, and, almost inevitably, it unrealistically overestimates its future willpower and ability to handle things later under self-imposed pressure. These cognitive biases aren't unique character flaws. They are often deeply ingrained, automatic mental processes that, if left unmanaged and unchallenged, will consistently sabotage intentional, productive action. The extraordinary transformation of Andrew Carnegie from an impoverished immigrant boy to an industrial titan offers a profound historical demonstration of the decisive advantage conferred by the capacity for superior mental mastery over oneself. Born in 1835 into a family of destitute Scottish weavers, Carnegie arrived in America at the age of 13, facing grinding poverty, minimal formal education, and no social connections. What truly separated him from countless other individuals in similarly dire circumstances wasn't some initial stroke of luck or advantage, but a profoundly superior level of conscious mental discipline. Carnegie systematically trained his mind against the common triggers and patterns of procrastination. When opportunity presented itself in the rapidly growing telegraph industry, he did not delay despite his youth and lack of experience. He seized it immediately. While others hesitated during the chaotic but promising railroad boom, Carnegie moved decisively to invest. When the nascent steel industry showed clear promise, he quickly redirected his resources towards it without succumbing to the paralysis of overthinking or waiting for absolute certainty. Carnegie's mastery over his own mind manifested most clearly and powerfully in his remarkable ability to simply begin difficult or important tasks immediately, rather than delaying them. Carnegie's personal writings and documented routines reveal his clear understanding that the first hour is the rudder of the day, that the way you begin your day often dictates its overall trajectory. He consciously developed morning routines and mental habits that ensured his mind engaged with his absolute priority work before the countless potential distractions and lesser tasks of the day could derail his intentions. This was, in a sense, a 19th century practical application of what modern psychology now calls strategic automaticity, creating deliberate systems to ensure important behaviors happen without needing continuous conscious effort or willpower. Recent neuroscience research robustly validates Carnegie's intuitive approach to combating procrastination. Brain imaging studies have shown that the act of merely contemplating a difficult or challenging task tends to activate the amygdala, a part of the brain often associated with threat detection and triggering the fight or flight response. This triggers the older limbic system part of the brain to seek immediate relief from this perceived discomfort or threat, often by pushing the task away and delaying. Mental mastery cultivated through conscious practice involves developing the capacity of the prefrontal cortex, the more rational, planning part of the brain, to effectively override this automatic avoidance response. This is achieved not simply through brute willpower in the moment, but through the deliberate, systematic cognitive restructuring of how the mind perceives the task and relates to discomfort. Developing this profound level of mental discipline begins with cultivating meta-awareness, the ability to simply observe your own thoughts and feelings about a task without immediately identifying with them or acting on them. When the urges towards procrastination arise, create psychological distance by labeling them objectively. I notice I am having the thought that I should really check emails again before starting this important report. Or, I observe the feeling of wanting to avoid this task because it feels hard. This simple, non-judgmental reframing interrupts the automatic response patterns and creates crucial space for conscious, intentional choice rather than knee-jerk reaction. Ultimately, achieving true mental mastery over procrastination requires intentionally aligning your core personal identity with the concept of action rather than delay. Carnegie didn't merely do productive things. He saw himself fundamentally as someone who was a decisive actor, a builder, a man who made things happen. This identity-based framing creates a powerful intrinsic drive and internal consistency. Taking prompt, decisive action becomes not just something you should do, but something that is fundamentally congruent with who you are. When delay or procrastination happens, it feels inconsistent with your very sense of self, making it much harder to tolerate long-term. The master of the mind eventually becomes the undisputed master of achievement. One of the most persistent misconceptions individuals harbor about motivation is the idea that it must somehow precede action. We believe that we must feel motivated, that we must be hit by a wave of inspiration or enthusiasm before we can begin a task. This flawed assumption creates a perpetual waiting game where you endlessly delay engagement, telling yourself you're just waiting for inspiration to arrive. The psychological reality is precisely the opposite. Meaningful, tangible action, consciously initiated, is the most reliable creator of motivation, rather than simply following it. This inverted relationship explains why the act of beginning is almost always the hardest part of any project or habit, yet once momentum is established through initial action, it tends to become self-sustaining. This counterintuitive principle operates through multiple reinforcing mechanisms within your mind and body. Neurologically, initiating action, particularly challenging or new action, triggers the release of neurotransmitters like dopamine in the brain. This dopamine surge is associated with pleasure, reward, increased focus, and enhanced drive, the very feelings we typically associate with being motivated. Psychologically, making progress, even small progress on a task, satisfies the fundamental human need for competence and autonomy. Seeing movement generates positive emotions and reinforces your belief in your ability to complete the task, creating an upward spiral that encourages continued engagement. Practically, taking initial action on a complex task, even imperfectly, generates crucial clarity. It reveals the next concrete steps required, eliminates ambiguity, and breaks down the overwhelming feeling of not knowing where to start, thus reducing the paralysis of uncertainty that frequently underlies procrastination. Few historical figures better exemplify this powerful principle that action generates momentum than J.P. Morgan. Born in 1837, Morgan built an immense financial empire, not through sudden strokes of genius or flashes of inspiration, but through a cascading series of calculated actions, each of which created vital momentum and capability for subsequent larger achievements. The pattern began early in his career. His initial focused engagement and performance in entry-level banking roles naturally led to opportunities for partnership that might never have materialized had he delayed his entry into the field. Morgan's strategic expansion from his core banking activities into restructuring troubled railroads, then investing in steel, electricity, and other burgeoning industries, vividly demonstrates how initial, decisive action in one domain creates unexpected opportunities, connections, and leverage in completely different ones. His focused hands-on work restructuring troubled railroads provided him with unique insights, practical knowledge, and vital connections that later facilitated his absolutely pivotal role in creating giant corporations like General Electric and U.S. Steel. Had Morgan waited to acquire comprehensive theoretical understanding of these complex industries before engaging, most opportunities to shape their future would have vanished before his preparation was complete. Morgan's handling of the devastating financial panic of 1907 perhaps most dramatically illustrates how prior consistent action builds essential capacity for subsequent, unprecedented achievement. Morgan's decades of accumulated banking actions, the relationships he had consistently built and maintained, the complex deals he had structured and executed, and the previous crises he had navigated successfully. All these past actions collectively created the unique knowledge, authority, and trust that enabled him, single-handedly, to coordinate the decentralized financial response from private banks that ultimately prevented the entire American economy from collapsing into ruin. This decisive, system-saving intervention was simply not possible for others who had spent those decades merely contemplating the financial system rather than actively participating in its operations and challenges. Modern behavioral science has effectively codified and validated what figures like Morgan demonstrated intuitively through practice centuries ago. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as success spirals or achievement sequences, where initiating even small initial wins creates psychological momentum, builds self-confidence, and develops capabilities that enable progressively more substantial accomplishments over time. These positive spirals operate through both internal mechanisms, like dopamine and self-efficacy, and external pathways like gaining new connections, opportunities, and clarity. Implementing this powerful action generates momentum principle in your own life begins with systematically lowering your initial activation thresholds. Define your starting actions for important tasks so modestly, so trivially small, that they effectively bypass the brain's built-in resistance mechanisms that dread the idea of hard work. Remember the earlier examples, writing just one paragraph instead of planning the entire report, making one initial sales call instead of preparing for 10, exercising for just 5 minutes instead of planning an hour-long workout. These micro-accessions sidestep the feeling of overwhelm that prevents initiation. Next, establish immediate feedback mechanisms that make your progress, however small, highly visible and tangible. The motivational power of action is fueled, in part, by recognizing that you are moving forward. Yet many significant projects offer only delayed or ambiguous feedback. Create artificial progress markers. Track the number of words written, the calls completed, the minutes spent, or the specific subtasks checked off. This provides concrete, visible evidence of advancement, creating a positive feedback loop even before external results materialize. Perhaps most important is intentionally implementing action triggers or environmental cues that functionally eliminate the need for conscious decision-making, which so often derails momentum. These simple external prompts automatically initiate the desired behavior without requiring conscious willpower or debate in the moment. The specific notebook always placed open at your breakfast table becomes the signal that immediately triggers your writing session. The running shoes intentionally placed by the door initiate your exercise without a second thought. The client list prepared the previous evening launches calls immediately upon arriving at your workspace. The momentum you seek doesn't exist before action. It powerfully emerges from it. The crucial choice is not between acting with momentum or without it, but between consciously creating momentum through intentional action, however small, or remaining stationary while passively awaiting a flood of motivation that never arrives independently. Your next action, however small, however imperfect, contains within it the seed and the potential for all your future achievements. Time, in its absolute perfect democracy, allocates exactly 24 hours each day to every single human being alive. Yet it operates with absolute indifference to how those precious hours are actually used or invested. This cold impartiality creates an unforgiving arithmetic. While everyone receives the identical allotment of time, the rewards for how that time is invested vary dramatically, often exponentially. In this stark equation, hesitation extracts perhaps the highest, most devastating cost of all. The fundamental penalty for hesitation is not merely temporary delay, it is the permanent loss of irreversible opportunity. Markets evolve at breakneck speed, circumstances shift unexpectedly, technological landscapes transform, and competitive positions are rapidly secured by those in motion, all while the hesitant remain trapped in paralysis, endlessly analyzing and deliberating. This fundamental dynamic explains why seemingly identical starting points in life or business produce radically different outcomes over time. Those who act decisively gain crucial, compounding advantages in positioning, learning, and market share that the hesitant simply can never recover later, regardless of how much effort they eventually apply. Cornelius Vanderbilt vividly epitomized this unforgiving principle throughout his remarkable, ruthless rise from a humble operator of a Staten Island ferry service to an immensely powerful railroad magnate. Born in 1794, with no inherited wealth or social connections, Vanderbilt built, arguably, the largest single fortune in 19th century America through consistent, shrewd decisiveness whenever significant opportunity appeared, unburdened by sentiment or hesitation. When nascent steamboat technology emerged as a potential superior alternative to traditional sailing vessels, Vanderbilt, already successful in sailing, immediately shifted his resources and focus to the new technology, despite having completely mastered the previous approach. When railroads began clearly supplanting water transportation as the dominant form of transport, he pivoted decisively. Again, rapidly reallocating his vast capital and strategic focus towards building rail empires, while many competitors remained emotionally or financially committed to their existing, increasingly obsolete steamboat models. Vanderbilt's defining characteristic wasn't primarily superior intelligence or privileged information. It was his sheer, almost instinctive capacity for immediate, bold action when potentially transformative opportunity became visible, coupled with an utter lack of sentimental hesitation towards past successes or methods. During the frantic California gold rush era, while others debated the best and safest approach for transportation. Vanderbilt quickly established a highly profitable steamship service route via Nicaragua, securing a logistical competitive advantage that his slower-moving rivals simply couldn't overcome once it was firmly established. His seemingly risky purchase of the struggling New York and Harlem Railroad further demonstrated this same timing advantage, acquiring undervalued assets on favorable terms, while others hesitated amidst uncertainty about its future viability. The compounding time penalty extracted by hesitation operates through several key mechanisms. Firstly, precious opportunity windows often close permanently, or market competitive conditions rapidly deteriorate while the hesitant individuals or organizations deliberate. Secondly, decisive early actors secure critical advantageous positions, be it market share, prime real estate, strategic partnerships, or key talent, that become increasingly difficult and costly for later entrants to displace. Thirdly, the hesitant miss out on accumulating invaluable real-world experience, practical knowledge, and crucial feedback that could only be gained through action and would have guided their subsequent decisions, creating significant compounding disadvantages in capability even if they finally decide to act much later. Modern global markets and technology have dramatically amplified these penalties. Digital networks and rapid innovation cycles compress opportunity timelines from years to months or even weeks. Globalization ensures someone, somewhere, will quickly act on promising opportunities that you might identify but hesitate to pursue. Digital platforms allow first-mover advantages to scale globally and rapidly, often creating winner-take-most dynamics that exponentially punish delayed entry or prolonged inaction. Overcoming this crippling hesitation habit begins with consciously recognizing its true, high cost, not merely postponed success, but potentially the permanent forfeiture of irreplaceable opportunity and compounding advantage. Implement clear decision thresholds that automatically trigger mandatory action when sufficient information, rather than perfect information or complete certainty, becomes available. Vanderbilt didn't wait for absolute certainty about new technologies or markets. He moved decisively when directional clarity emerged, knowing action would provide further clarity. Create robust accountability structures, external to your own wavering willpower, that genuinely make hesitation more uncomfortable or costly than action. This could include public commitments, putting meaningful financial stakes on the line, or establishing partnerships where others genuinely depend on your timely movement. Establish predetermined consequences for delay that actively override the temporary, fleeting comfort of postponement. Perhaps most importantly, embrace and develop rapid prototyping or minimum viable product approaches for testing opportunities, rather than relying solely on extensive pre-action theoretical analysis. Small, quick, real-world experiments provide vastly more valuable, concrete information and learning than prolonged theoretical evaluation or planning, while critically preserving the timing advantage essential for success in dynamic environments. Ask yourself honestly, right now, today, what significant opportunity currently before me will very likely disappear or deteriorate if I don't act promptly, within a specified time frame? What potential competitive advantage, if secured now through decisive action, would become exponentially more valuable and defensible over time? What critical knowledge, essential feedback, or vital connections available only through initiating action would immediately and substantially improve my subsequent decisions and increase my likelihood of long-term success? Procrastination persists not fundamentally because individuals lack sufficient self-discipline in isolated moments, but primarily because they exist and attempt to overcome it within systems and environments that are intentionally designed to foster it. Most people attempt to battle the urge to delay while being constantly surrounded by technologically engineered distractions, notifications, social media feeds, lacking clear, explicitly defined priorities for their limited time and energy, and operating without structured accountability that makes timely action naturally easier and more rewarding than postponement. This fundamental mismatch explains why willpower-based approaches, applied within fundamentally flawed systems, inevitably fail or provide only temporary relief. Even extraordinary reserves of personal determination cannot sustainably overcome systems that are fundamentally working against productive action. The sustainable solution to chronic procrastination is not found in simply attempting to apply greater effort or brute willpower within broken systems, but in deliberately designing environments, crafting intentional routines, and cultivating specific mindsets where procrastination genuinely becomes functionally harder or less appealing than engaging in productive action. This systematic approach transforms the challenge of procrastination from a perpetual, exhausting battle of internal character or motivation into an engineering problem, one that is effectively solved through deliberate, intelligent design of your surrounding system and habits, rather than through endless, draining internal struggle. Henry Leland perfectly embodied this design-based approach to overcoming inertia and ensuring consistent, high-level execution throughout his extraordinary career, which included establishing legendary manufacturing standards and founding both the Cadillac and Lincoln Motor Company. Leland's remarkable success stemmed not from sporadic bursts of creative genius or motivation, but from the meticulously designed systems he implemented within his organizations, systems that ensured consistent, high-quality output regardless of any individual's momentary feelings or motivation. Leland's manufacturing facilities were physical reflections of his deep understanding that environment fundamentally dictates behavior. He meticulously arranged workspaces to eliminate unnecessary movement and potential inefficiency, designed specialized tools that standardized production quality and reduced opportunities for error, and implemented systematic inspection processes at key points that created immediate, unavoidable accountability for performance. These carefully designed system elements didn't merely improve efficiency. They actively made precise, high-quality manufacturing processes functionally inevitable and easy, rather than optional or dependent on individual willpower. His personal routines and work habits demonstrated an equally profound intentionality and commitment to design. Leland began each day reviewing a precisely defined short list of his absolute priorities, conducted planned inspections at consistent intervals throughout the day, and maintained systematic documentation and record-keeping that created continuity and forced awareness of progress, or lack thereof, between days. This wasn't simply demonstrating impressive discipline. It was a form of profound environmental and systemic self-design that made procrastination, omission, or inconsistency genuinely more difficult, inconvenient, or visible than disciplined progress. To implement this design principle in your own life, begin by consciously designing your decision architecture to minimize the critical resistance points where procrastination typically begins. Pre-decide exactly what specific priority task you will work on during designated time blocks each day, eliminating the initial paralysis of choice that so frequently precedes delay. Standardize your starting routines for important tasks. The same music, the same dedicated physical location, the same brief mental warm-up. These cues bypass the crucial initiation resistance that derails most productive intentions before they even begin. Perhaps most powerful is designing your social architecture to make procrastination socially expensive. Intentionally create structures of regular, consistent accountability to others. This could involve finding an accountability partner, joining a structured mastermind group, or providing regular public updates on your progress towards defined goals with specific deliverables and deadlines. This actively transforms procrastination from a private, internal delay with minimal immediate external consequence into a visible, public commitment with tangible social cost if not adhered to, powerfully leveraging our natural desire to maintain social consistency and reputation. Finally, understand that you must implement progressive systems that adapt as your own patterns of procrastination evolve. Like cybersecurity systems requiring ongoing updates against new threats, your anti-procrastination designs require continuous auditing and refinement as your mind inevitably develops countermeasures or finds loopholes against initial constraints. Regularly audit where and how procrastination is currently manifesting in your life and adjust your systems accordingly to block those specific escape routes. Create visible metrics that make your progress transparent while simultaneously making procrastination unmistakable and unavoidable to your own eyes. Tracking systems convert vague statements like, "I'm working on it," into concrete, measurable indicators of advancement, which immediately and clearly reveal when procrastination has taken hold, eliminating the subtle self-deception that often accompanies delay. Procrastination persists not primarily because you lack an innate trait of discipline, but because your current internal and external systems are functionally designed in a way that makes delay easier and more comfortable than consistent progress. Design different systems and different results will become not just possible, but genuinely inevitable. Each moment of delay you choose actively forges another link in the insidious chain of procrastination, a psychological restraint that begins almost imperceptibly, feeling light and easily broken, but gradually, inevitably, immobilizes your full potential. This process of progressive psychological bondage explains why what starts as a temporary, seemingly harmless postponement so often transforms into a permanent, deeply ingrained limitation on capability and achievement. The chain of procrastination strengthens itself through a devastating self-reinforcing formula. Each individual decision to delay actively diminishes your future motivation for that task, while simultaneously making the delayed task itself appear disproportionately more daunting, unpleasant, or larger in your imagination. This negative, self-perpetuating cycle creates a psychological prison far more confining and difficult to escape than any physical constraint. While external obstacles or difficulties can often be overcome through determined effort and creative problem-solving, the mental barriers and distorted perceptions erected by persistent, habitual procrastination become increasingly insurmountable over time. The fundamental truth hidden within this seemingly irreversible process is simultaneously sobering and profoundly liberating. The chains binding you are, at their core, self-forged through your own cumulative decisions to delay, and consequently, only decisive, conscious action initiated by you can ultimately break them. The extraordinary rise of James J. Hill from a humble railway clerk to a builder of an immense railroad empire perfectly demonstrates the transformative power of breaking these invisible, self-imposed restraints. Born in 1838, and losing sight in one eye at the young age of 9, Hill faced significant circumstances and challenges that might easily have justified profound delay, diminished ambition, or even surrender for many individuals. Instead, he consciously recognized that immediate action, however modest or challenging, was the only viable path to eventual achievement and self-reliance. When Hill identified the enormous potential of developing vital rail connections between St. Paul, Minnesota, and the untapped Pacific Northwest, a colossal undertaking, he did not wait for ideal financial conditions, despite facing severely limited capital. He did not wait for potential competitors to disappear, despite knowing he would face fierce opposition. He did not wait for perfect technical solutions, despite the immense engineering challenges of crossing undeveloped northern wilderness. Hill simply began immediately with the resources available to him, incrementally building out the system. His Great Northern Railway, an empire built without government subsidies, a rarity at the time when most considered such a feat impossible, stands as a towering testament to the profound freedom and capability that exists beyond procrastination's deceptive chains. The most insidious aspect of procrastination's bondage is how it systematically distorts your perception of reality, making the possibility of escape seem less likely with each passing moment of delay. Tasks that are repeatedly delayed grow monstrous and terrifying in your imagination. Opportunities that were once clearly visible and achievable appear increasingly remote and impossible the longer you postpone acting on them. Potential that remains unrealized over extended periods appears increasingly unrealizable in your own eyes. This dangerous perceptual distortion creates a powerful internal barrier that explains why breaking free requires initiating immediate action, rather than engaging in further, often paralyzing contemplation or planning. The chains themselves, the accumulation of delayed moments, prevent you from accurately assessing your own capability and the true nature of the task. Liberation from this self-imposed bondage begins with a single, conscious, decisive act that consciously shatters the old pattern of delay. This first act isn't primarily about finally completing a specific task, though that is a consequence. It is fundamentally about reclaiming your sense of agency and power through the physical and mental experience of forward movement. The particular action you choose for this breakthrough moment matters less than the profound psychological impact it creates, the lived, irrefutable experience that the chains of delay can indeed be broken. It's time to stop waiting and start doing. Procrastination has already stolen enough of your time, enough of your dreams, and far too much of your potential. The moment you decide to take that first step of action is the precise moment you reclaim fundamental control over your time, your potential, and your future. Say goodbye to the excuses that have held you back. Embrace the uncomfortable but ultimately liberating power of decisive action and consistent progress. Watch as your life and capabilities begin to transform, not in some distant future, but as a direct result of the choices you make today. Act now. Own your future.